Okay. Hey everyone. Hey everyone. Yeah. So I'm Luca from the Meta Fair team. Today I'm going to be talking about, grabbing all the stuff that you guys just heard about SkyPilot and like scaling these to like, pretty large scales. And it's some of the work that we've been going through at Meta. Yeah. And, like thanks for the SkyPilot team as well. Especially like, Kevin was helping us a lot to like enable a bunch of these things. So yeah. Okay. And like by the end of the talk, we're kind of like going to have a better idea of like what it looks like when you're running SkyPilot at like the mega large scales. Um, okay, so um, this I thought that I was like the first one to present, so like I just prepared like a small introduction in case people wasn't aware of like what SkyPilot is. But since like they already presented SkyPilot, SkyPilot's kind of like this layer between like the user workloads and like the GPU clusters. So if you're using SkyPilot, you're going to have like some version of a server or a computer. Then you have your workload, which is going to be like something like Torch, Ray, Docker, or anything else. And then, you're kind of like sending that workload into SkyPilot, and then SkyPilot's going to have like a bunch of like super clusters, and then it's going to be doing that decision for you of like, oh, where do you place the thing, right? Like based on like for example, like the hardware that's available, right? Like you can see, oh, like you're asking for H100s, like doesn't have H100 here. So like, it go kind of like tries to do that scheduling for you. So yeah, it's like the layer between the workload and the clusters. I think one of the nice things here is that like uh, it enables you to like just remove and like add clusters, right? Because like if people are just using SkyPilot as the workload, you can like just take the cluster out and like bring a new cluster in, and like it doesn't really change anything for the users. So the researchers kind of have like a great experience because like they only care about like their workloads and not so much about like the stuff like Slurm and the schedulers and things like that. So yeah. Yeah, wait. Yeah, and okay, so this image looks like one of the first versions that we had of like SkyPilot at Meta. This specifically like for fair at Meta. So you have like all the different superclusters, and then you have like your computer. You're gonna have like the Sky CLI thing, which is it's generally like talking to some type of configuration. And I mean, if you have like Slurm cluster, it's gonna be Slurm. If you have Kubernetes, it's gonna be like the kube config thing. But you're pretty much like using that configuration file to like find all the clusters, right? And the thing about SkyPilot as well is that like you have to make that connection through the cluster. So like you can imagine that like have like maybe like 20K GPUs at each of them. So like it kind of like becomes super easy to just scale the thing because you kind of like just keep scaling like the number of clusters like as much as you want, right? Yeah, one of the challenging things for us is that when you're running like SkyPilot in your computer, there's like a lot of stuff that you have to follow at like big companies for people to be able to connect to the clusters, right? So, you're going to be doing stuff like 2FA for all the clusters. There's a bunch of like certificates and keys that you need like on the user machines so that like all of these connections kind of work. And if you're using Kubernetes, there's like even more stuff because like sometimes you want to like spin a new pod in the cluster, and then you want to make sure that like the thing is healthy and that like the user can connect to his thing. So, there are kind of like a lot of challenges of like enabling SkyPilot because of those things. And yeah, so let me see if I missed anything. I think that's all for here. Yeah, and there's kind of like pretty much like two main issues with this setup that makes this setup like kind of like pretty hard to use for researchers. Uh, which is like, the first thing that makes it pretty hard to use is that you have like this Slurm configuration thing. And if you look at like, I imagine that the other big players would be seeing something similar. But if you look at the setup at Meta, like you're going to see something like, oh, if you want to set up this thing, like every single researcher is going to have to do like something around 10 steps to like, enable all the different clusters. And I mean, if any of you has gone through this experience of like, oh, I have a cool thing that I want to share with researchers, but like, oh, I have to do 10 steps, it's like, yeah, like by the second step, you already lose like almost like 90% of the people, right? Like they're not going to be doing like 10 steps to enable something new. So, if we actually have these like doing all the 10 steps, by the end of the thing, you're like maybe going to have like 2% of the users. And this is like one of the main issues, right? Because it's mostly around of like, oh, how to get like the certificates in place for the user. And like depends on the environment that he's in within the company, like that thing kind of looks different, like the CLIs look different and so on. So yeah, 10 steps, like you lost like 98% of the users. And then the other big issue, if anyone wants to like think about what the other one is, a little bit before I jump, it's like 2FA. At this one, like you're going to lose like 100% of the people. Like the 2% you had, it's like went to zero. Because, like 2FA, it's what you're asking for the user to do. It's like, okay, we have like this SkyPilot thing, which is pretty cool. Many clusters that you can connect to. You kind of have like, you're getting access to like kind of like all the GPUs we have. But then, when you run things like Sky Show GPUs, which is like just to, so you can see what you have available in your environment, you're going to have like to do every one of them. So it's like, oh, if you have 5, people just want to see the GPUs and like you're going to be doing 2FA 5 times. So like, there's like no chance people are going to be doing that, right? Because they're for them to be doing like all of these, it's like you literally already lost everyone at this point. So the thing that we found that was helpful for us is that we tried to write like a single binary that kind of does all of these things for like every single user in like every single environment that Meta has. So it's the thing that you can see at the top. It's like the feature install fair tunnels. That kind of works in like pretty much any machine in like the Meta fleet. So like every single computer, like every server, every single one, they're like some for like the average developer at Meta, gonna be seeing that experience like everywhere, which is like, you kind of like, you have like pretty much 2 commands now. It's like, oh, you install the thing and then you start the thing. And like, what does the thing do? It's like, it kind of writes all the configuration that you need for the user. So, those previously like, we were like, oh, there's 10 steps. It's like, oh yeah, never mind. Like we just, just have a binary that like does all of that for you. And then the other thing that it does as well, it's like, if you're familiar with CMUX, it's like a terminal multiplexer. You're pretty much like just opening a bunch of like terminal sessions, and then we use every single one of the sessions to open like tunnels between the user computer and the clusters. So, it's like, okay, you just open like a bunch of sessions to every single cluster. People do have to do 2FA still, but like they only do it once. Like, to open the sessions, you do 2FA. And then, you're going to be using stuff like SSH or ET tunnels. It kind of depends on the environment at Meta. So like, if you're like, they have like different notions of environments. Like there's the corp stuff, which is usually like laptops and stuff like that. And like the servers, which is production. In some of them, like they don't have ET, and some of them they do. So, the thing, it's kind of like doing all of that for the user. It's like, oh, whenever you have ET, you want to ET because it's kind of like way better. The thing, once you establish the tunnels, it kind of like never dies. It's like only dies if like your computer, like you turn off the computer or something. So yeah, and then, what you get out of this is that like, okay, now I have like 2 commands and you run Sky Show GPUs and like, it's not going to ask you for like none of the 2FA stuff, right? It's like, it's just going to go and like straight connect into these tunnels and then see everything that's on the cluster. So, kind of solves like both of like the previous issues, like no more 10 steps, no more 2FA. So yeah, now it's easier to like bump the number of users like a little bit, yeah. And I think one of the cool things as well that we've seen here is that people started using things like like Claude and like my Claude to like, oh, I can run that from my own computer and like from your own worktop, like work computer, you're going to have access to like hundreds of thousands of GPUs. And like, at this point, you're like just giving Claude literally access to like all of them. So, Zengal was like talking earlier about things like, running the Karpathy like auto research stuff. And, and then that thing kind of understands like, oh, these clusters has like H100. So like, if I'm testing stuff, I'm going to test on the H100 one. When the scale go to the H200. So, you're kind of like, I think it's a pretty cool setup because like, you kind of like, you give all full access to these AI tools. And I think the other thing as well is that if you're a student or something and you're working on a research project outside Meta and you have like a SkyPilot workflow, like as soon as you join Meta from like any machine, you can like, you're going to have like, if you're joining Fair specifically, like, you're going to have access to all of these GPUs. So it's like, it makes it kind of like pretty easy for you to like massively scale your work, right? It's like, oh, you're already working on SkyPilot, now you bring it to Meta. And then, you run those 2 commands and now you have like the full backend kind of available for you. Yeah. And, the last 2 slides, it's a little bit of like how the environment looks like on with SkyPilot and without SkyPilot. So, this is like without SkyPilot. That was like the environment that we were in before, which is, yeah, we have like, a bunch of clusters and people have like to SSH to every single one of them. And then like they run their workloads, right? And, and then it's like, oh, their workload and then, the scheduler and then the GPU pool. But it's kind of bad for the users because, it's pretty easy to like keep scaling clusters. And then the user experience is that like they're gonna have to manage like many windows of stuff open all the time. And what we've usually seen in this case is that, like people are running Claude at like this level, right? So which is, it's not as good as if you could be running one level above and like using the entire thing. Um, so yeah, and then after SkyPilot, that's kind of what you have. It's like, oh, you have like the server computer, and then your workload, you can just run that, and then you ask for GPUs for SkyPilot, and SkyPilot places those GPUs like on any of the clusters. Um, so yeah, again, the comparison before, it's like a bunch of user actions, and after lot less user actions. Yeah, and I think if you look at this image from like trying to analyze, okay, that's pretty cool, but like where can we get better? I think like when I look at this image, it seems like we have like a pretty good setup for like a minimum cluster, right? Like if you want to scale to like hundreds of thousands, like millions of GPUs, it's like you can just keep adding clusters here, right? Uh, like it seems like it's a pretty good setup for like literally the minimum stuff that you're going to need. I think like one of the points that like, it's interesting to see how it's going to evolve. It's that like, if you look at these things, we have like kind of like schedulers on top of schedulers, right? We have like, oh, we have SkyPilot here, and then like we have Slurm inside. So it looks a little bit weird, and like I think we could probably do like maybe a better job of like I don't know, like maybe you bubble the Slurm stuff up to SkyPilot as much as possible, and then you just like you kind of like bypass Slurm and just give like full GPU access, and then I think it would be pretty close to like the minimum setup that you would need to scale the thing kind of like forever. But yeah, that's it. Thanks.